Hello, episode 32 of the Notcast. Today I'm going to be talking about second or sixth Star Wars movie, depending on your point of view, The Empire Strikes Back, widely regarded as the best Star Wars film ever made. Should point out today is the 21st of December 2020, and therefore I've completely failed in taking part in that ancient tradition of 2112 Day, where people listen to Rush's 2112 album and not at 12 minutes past 9 in the evening on the 21st of December. I have done so by failing to do so on the grounds that I completely forgot. And if there isn't a Tim's Twitter listening party taking place right about now, I'd be very surprised. There probably isn't, on the grounds that probably none of the members of the band who are alive could actually be on Twitter if they could be bothered. Anyway, today, talking about the 1980 film and associated spin-off thingamidoodas relating to The Empire Strikes Back, which is generally regarded as the best Star Wars film. And I don't disagree. I think it's bloody brilliant, and I'm going to explain why. Now, first things first, this is The Empire Strikes Back annual, published by Marvel and Grand Dreams, instead of Brown and Watson, who did the previous one, presumably because Marvel and Grand Dreams paid a little bit more money. Now, I'm going to give you a little hint, or a little tip. When I was younger, people always used to cut out this particular slot of this particular page that told you how much this cost. So I'm guessing about £1.75 for this, but your parents, or perhaps your friend's parents, didn't want you to know that they spent a whole £1.75 on you. That was all they were worth. These days, annuals are very different. In those days, they generally used to take the comic book adaptations of the films, put them into a comic book, and voila, here you are. Now, unlike the first one, the Star Wars one, this is full colour all the way through. Oh, be still my beating heart, eh? And it has some different lines of dialogue in it, but I think I'll get to those later on. Certainly, the famous "I love you, I know" line between Han and Leia is a little different, because instead of that, Han Solo says, "I'll be back." Maybe not in the Arnold Schwarzenegger voice, but there you go. So anyway, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back. Got lots of things to show you, lots of things to talk about. Primarily, I'm going to talk about how this is one of the best Star Wars films there is. It's got everything. I mean, like the other second films in the series, like Attack of the Clones and The Last Jedi, it's basically a chase movie. So following the 3-act structure which I talked about previously, which is always stasis, crisis and resolution, every second act inside that sits with a crisis. Now this film ends with a crisis. It's classic second part of a 3-part tale, but not only that, it's the standard crisis of either sneaking into things or running away from things. That's what good Star Wars movies tend to be about. Phantom Menace has a lot of sneaking into things. Attack of the Clones has a lot of sneaking into things and running away from things. Revenge of the Sith, the same as Star Wars, same with Empire Strikes Back, same with Return of the Jedi. Sneaking into things, running away from things. Rise of Skywalker, which I think is the worst Star Wars film, has very little sneaking into things. Has quite a lot of hunting for things. But I think if I start talking about that, I might give myself an aneurysm, so I'm not going to do it just yet. So what did The Empire Strikes Back do right? Well, it upped the stakes right from the off, and those stakes weren't just the ones that were on the screen. Lucas put down all his money in order to have this movie made exactly to his artistic vision. It really was his do or die moment, and he risked the future of the franchise. He risked, if he had to borrow any money off 20th Century Fox to finish the film, handing over the rights to them, and then they could take the films and do sequels in whatever direction they wanted to do. And after having made the holiday special, he learned his lesson that nobody else really should be in touch of. Pardon me, I've cut down on the caffeine, but it is quite late. Okay, I'm yawn behind here, and someone told me that was cute when I did that. I don't know if it's true. George Lucas really had his, the future of the franchise tied up in this movie. If it had failed, if he'd lost all his money, if it had gone over budget, he'd have to hand the reins of Star Wars to 20th Century Fox. And for all of our sakes, I'm very glad that he didn't, because when he let go of the franchise for the holiday special, if you've seen the holiday special, you will know it is awful. It is on YouTube now, and no matter what quality it comes in, you cannot hide the fact that it is terrible. It starts with a 15-minute sequence, not in English, which involves a Wookiee pleasuring himself to a holographic image of a human. It's really, really bizarre. And by the way, in the holiday special, of course, you find out that Chewbacca's family members include being called Lumpy and I think it's Itchy as well. They're all very strange names. It's terrible. It's got Jefferson Airplane turn up in it. Don't watch it, okay? You will never be able to unwatch it. Once you've seen it, it'll be like, I don't know, if you saw your parents kissing in a way that made you feel inappropriate when you were about 4, and you'd be like, "Oh my God, no! Stop it! Please stop it!" Or like right now, when we look at the news and we see pictures of very, very horrible things that have happened. Those images get burnt into your mind forever. You can't escape them. The Star Wars Holiday Special is exactly that, but for all the wrong reasons. So, with the Star Wars train fully up and running, we have the novelization by Donald F. Glut, which was a great new film spectacular. In case you hadn't worked out, the film is great and new. And it has 8 pages of fabulous colour in this. This is the 1980 paperback. I have no recollection whether this is the actual paperback I owned as a child or whether this is the one which I have picked up some other time. Normally you can tell by having a look in here and seeing is it got the price in pencil in the top here from the charity shop, and I think it might do. I think it might cost me a whole pound, but these were very popular books at the time when these films first came out. Mass market paperbacks, soundtrack albums, comic strip adaptations, those were the ways in which you relived your memories of the film, as the film only came to the cinemas at the theatre. So for example, when they re-released Star Wars in 1981, it was only available in the cinemas, not available on VHS. So if you wanted to see the film, you had to go and pay to see it every time you saw it. Now this all changed with the home video release of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I think that was maybe Christmas 1982, when instead of charging £80 for a VHS tape, they started charging £10 for a VHS tape, and they thought they'd have more money by selling that film more than 8 times for every single rental copy that they had. So if you were in a rental video store, for example, you have maybe 3 rental video stores per, let's say 10,000 people in your village, maybe. So, where I was growing up, which was in Cottridge, we had Blake's and we had another video store, the name of which I've forgotten now. We had 2 video stores, and they had maybe 1 or 2 copies each of the Star Wars, which cost them £80 on VHS. So that's really only at most 4 copies that you can sell. If you can sell more than 8 times 4, my mental arithmetic's not so good, I'm guessing 8 times 4 is about 36. If you can 32. If you can sell more than 32 copies of the Star Wars movie to that particular little, suburb, then you're making more money. Okay, so your raw production cost is higher, but you're making more money, and that's probably where they were going. So Empire Strikes Back was still only viewable in the theatres. The idea of going back and rewatching Star Wars endlessly and picking out all the little nitpicky moments in it were things that you couldn't do. The visuals that you had on screen, they were designed to be seen once and then they'd disappear. So for example, the images that we've got in here, you're not meant to look carefully at that a dozen times. You're not meant to look carefully at that a dozen times. It's meant to be there and gone, and you've got maybe 3 seconds where you look at it. And maybe that explains some of the visual effects that we've got. But really, that film kind of blew my mind, expanded my mind in terms of Star Wars. So there's quite a few things that you had to start off with there. You had the Imperial March appeared for the first time. Yoda appeared. The Emperor appeared. There was a lot of really big expanding stuff, and we saw worlds that we'd never seen before. So, for example, this is where I haven't rehearsed, and it's probably screamingly obvious that I haven't rehearsed. Here's the making of the Empire Strikes Back book, which, if I remember correctly, is by J.W. Rinsler, who I heard has stage 4 cancer. So, great shame. But the Empire Strikes Back had scenes in it where you were only going to see these once. So, for example, I'm just going to quickly kind of just scroll through here and see if I can find a scene that illustrates it. So it was really groundbreaking, The Empire Strikes Back, in terms of its effects. And the reason it was groundbreaking was perhaps in ways that you hadn't necessarily realised, because up to that point, all of the special effects shots that there were in the movies and everything was all at night or in space, so you could hide all of your matte lines, you could hide all of your layering in the darkness. So, for example, if you watch The Empire Strikes Back, you've got scenes with huge amounts of AT-ATs, land speeders, all that type of stuff going around in bright daylight. And if you look very carefully at the non-remastered version, the original theatrical release, which is only available on this DVD and the Laserdisc and the VHS, and therefore has been deleted from public viewing since 2006. You look at the edges that there are inside the land speeders, and you can see the outlines of what's happening behind them around that. Great example here. So these scenes here with the AT-ATs, nothing like that had ever been done before. That's stop motion, Ray Harryhausen type stuff. Obviously, long before the ages of CGI, long before they were able to paint out the images which were appearing. So, what you were seeing is you were seeing through the cockpit of the snowspeeder. You were seeing the view of what was actually happening on the ground, and you're not meant to be able to see that happen. Whilst I remember, here is some really interesting concept art. So these are some original poster designs. Those would look absolutely brilliant if those were printed up. Some of those logos, I mean, this looks oddly familiar, doesn't it? Some of those logos would look fantastic. But what you've got a really brave and bold movie that is unafraid to have huge numbers of sequences set in broad daylight, and really showing the effects and the differences that you've got. Now, whilst we're talking about posters, I just opened on this page. What you can see is actually there's a clear comparison between the Gone with the Wind poster down here at the bottom and this poster up here at the top. It's designed to echo the traditional Gone with the Wind kind of 40s serialisation. So really, it's a great movie, and it pushed forward the technical envelope around the capabilities of special effects. Nothing had ever looked like it before, and nothing was ever going to be as revolutionary again, I think, for having open air, daylight, snow landscapes. Nothing was quite like it before. The Star Wars was a very compact movie, so it was set in a set number. It was set on a desert planet, Death Star, Millennium Falcon, and then you had Yavin, which was, I don't know, Guatemala or somewhere, and then you went back to the Death Star. So it had a very small world. It had a couple of Star Destroyers in it, maybe, but nothing had ever really expanded it out. So I'm going to talk about, The Empire Strikes Back is one of the best sequels that has ever been made, because it expands and it builds upon and it enhances the previous movie. Now, one of the other sequels, by the way, which is just as revolutionary as Happy Death Day to You 2, or Happy Death Day to You, the second Happy Death Day movie, which I watched that and I was like, oh my God, I thought I saw one version of the movie, and then when you watch Happy Death Day to You, you suddenly realise that the movie is happening in a completely different universe, and all the assumptions that you'd had around it previously had been fallen to pieces. So it's a brilliant sequel because it makes the original film better, and Darth's character becomes far more expansive, far more interesting. So you start off in Star Wars, and he's this evil space wizard, and he's got a laser sword, and he's in a really bad mood. And then in The Empire Strikes Back, you kind of suddenly realise that, he's got this whole other narrative that's going on around it. He's got the Emperor who's telling him what to do. He's still got the issues around all the other stuff that happened before. He's chasing down Luke Skywalker, and it's he's not just a bouncer that's throwing you out of the airlock into outer space. Darth Vader is evil, and he is looking to, he knows the secret now. In the revised special edition version, the Emperor does make an appearance by hologram, and is played by the actor who plays the Emperor in all the other movies. In the original 1980 theatrical version, the Emperor is voiced by an actor called Clive Revill, and is a mixture of a woman and a monkey's eyes. It looks weird and wrong, but when it was reshot for the DVD release and the special edition releases by Ian McDiarmid, they castrated Darth Vader's character a little, because Darth Vader's character needed to be told that Luke Skywalker was his son, whereas in the the original theatrical version, it was pretty clear that that revelation, Luke, I am your father, appeared. We knew when the audience knew. We knew when Luke knew. We were able to experience that same sense of shock and revulsion and fear and no and denial at the same time as Luke did. And there's a fascinating video on YouTube where someone's audio recorded the soundtrack from a theatrical screening of The Empire Strikes Back, and the line when Darth Vader goes, "No, Luke, I am your father," and it is dead quiet. You literally could hear a goose fart. Maybe not a goose, maybe a butterfly is probably a better analogy. Because goose, as seen in Angry Goose Game, and swans, they are not quiet creatures. So you could hear a butterfly fart during this particular scene where he goes, "No, Luke, I am your father." Everyone's like, "Oh my God, Rick, what?" And Luke actually, teaches the audience how to respond to that by going, "No, that's impossible. That's terrible. I'm going to throw myself off, a weather vane into a huge gaping hole, rather than face the fact that I am actually the secret child of the evil bastard overlord of the universe." Well, or the second deputy evil bastard overlord of the universe. Now, it's just a much better film. It takes twists and turns, and it goes and things, and it teaches you things, and it's able to tell a story in a way that expands upon the original film, and it leaves lots and lots of plot threads open. So the theory of Chekhov's gun is, if you put Chekhov's gun on the table in the first act, you've got to fire it in the third act. Well, this is the second act of a third act play, so you're spending the whole of that movie in suspense around. You get to the end, and Luke's had his hand cut off. Darth Vader is Luke's father. Han Solo is frozen in carbonite. The bad guys have won. The fleet is decimated. They've lost their secret base. The Emperor's in a terrible mood, because he always is, because he's the Emperor, and he just can't get enough power. Damn it! And it's all of that. And then at the end of it, when Luke is taking off to go to Bespin, and Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi appear, Yoda says, "No, there is another." And then you spend the next 3 years going, who is the other? Who is the other person that they're talking about? Who is the second hope for the Jedi? And I remember very, very clearly in my mind being 8, 9 years old on the playground at Bourneville Junior and Infants, debating furiously, who is the other? And the idea that it was Leia was never in there. There's somebody else. There's a second Jedi we haven't discovered. We're going to see Luke's going to have a twin or something. Now there's evil Luke with 2 U's, who turns to the dark side in the expanded universe that's now been relegated as legends, stroke bullshit, in there. But, I spent a long time debating with my school friends, because I had friends when I was at school, by the way. Can't remember many of them now, but then again, I was only 8 at the time, and that's about 40 years ago. I remember, talking on the playground in 1981, 1982, going, who is the other one? Was it Han? Has Han got the Force? And actually, as a theory, I'm going to go with this theory, and this is not a theory I've heard anywhere else, but you always know that when Han is like basically a super mega lucky turbo bastard, he's always able to manage to pull victory from the jaws of defeat in the films. Maybe Han is Force sensitive and has Force powers and doesn't know, and it manifests itself in his ability to be super lucky about things. So to go out on a Tauntaun in the middle of the night in the freezing desert, when the chances of survival are 8,722 to 1, or whatever the number actually is, and to be able to go out there and find Luke and stay alive all night. That's not just some lucky do. Maybe there's a bit of force power in there, and maybe that's what happens with Kylo Ren in the subsequent sequel trilogy. Is that, you know, being the child of Luke and Leia as they become a couple, is he somehow it, embodied with you know, double force powers or something, and again, like Anakin and in the prequel trilogy, is that he has power but not control, and not skill in order to control it. But I'll talk about the sequel trilogy at another point when I can be bothered. I mean, effectively, there's some really interesting ideas at play here. There's some fascinating concepts that come into there. You've suddenly got the idea of a mercenary who's Lando, who's basically gone straight. He's kind of become the corrupt mayor of a cloud city, which is kind of like, you know, drawing an analogy with perhaps some of the more corrupt countries that we've got. Lando is, yeah, probably very similar to Boris Johnson, really. As long as he can get a joke, people laugh at him, and you know, women flock around him. He's probably quite happy. He doesn't want to have to do any of the actual work. He just wants to be, you know, the playboy leader of Cloud City, and then all of a sudden finds out that actually that stuff comes with responsibilities, and he's way out of his depth there. Is perhaps an interesting thing about Lando, and maybe that's why he has a late in life career change from, you know, evil corrupt mayor into you know, rebel general. Don't quite know how he's managed to achieve that, really. Class act of defection there, but you know, that's The Empire Strikes Back for you, and you know, it's a brilliant sequel because it leaves all the questions hanging and all the questions unanswered, and it's made you suddenly realise that just out of shot in Star Wars, there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on. And there's some great fiction which has been published by Disney recently. There's a series of books called From a Certain Point of View, which detail other characters that are, you know, in the background or standing around or just walking out of shot in Star Wars and giving their story about, you know, there's a great one about the guy that's carrying, I think, the ice cream maker in on Hoth, or the guy that bumps past Han and Leia when they're flirting in the corridor, and it's like, this Han guy's everywhere, and everyone thinks he's brilliant, and he's stuck up, and he's not very good, and he's massively overrated. You know, it's that kind of stuff. Very funny. So, Empire Strikes Back comes out. That's not the end of the story. There's a couple of other things that happen, which are quite interesting indeed. First one is these. You may not know about these. Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi radio dramas that were broadcast on NPR, National Public Radio, in the US. Now, Star Wars was broadcast in 1981, Empire Strikes Back, I think, in 1983. We had to wait until 1996 for Return of the Jedi. Now, if you haven't heard them, I think they're available on YouTube. Also available as scripts. I mean, these effectively expand the two films out into, you know, 4 or 5 hours of audio drama, and tell you, you know, what was so dangerous about Beggar's Canyon, what compelled Princess Leia to join the rebellion, what kept money-hungry Han Solo from double-crossing Luke Skywalker and Ben Kenobi. These are obviously all the questions which are in here. All the answers are in here, and yeah, there's things like deleted subplots, there's sound effects from scenes that were never completed in the film or scenes that weren't used in the film. They're in here. And by the way, you know, a number of major actors appear in this. So in Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, Mark Hamill voices Luke, Anthony Daniels voices C-3PO, and in The Empire Strikes Back, Billy Dean Williams voices Lando Calrissian. Now, in a strange turn of events, Mark Hamill doesn't voice Luke in the radio drama of Return of the Jedi, but John Lithgow does the voice of Yoda, and that is quite an experience, as I'm sure you can imagine. But it's all on YouTube, so give that a listen if you've got several hours spare. And whilst I was talking earlier about the making of the Empire Strikes Back book here by J.W. Rinsler, the original idea that they had was to republish this now long deleted book, Once Upon a Galaxy, which I've managed to get as a PDF. The original paperback of that cost an absolute fortune. I remember reading it, trying to understand all the secrets and the hints and the tips, all the things that were going on in there. But rather than republish it directly, when they went back and looked at the text and they thought about possibly re-editing it, they suddenly came up with the idea to produce 3 enormous making of tomes about the movies. So there's the making of Star Wars, which is here, relatively affordable, especially in smaller editions. There's the Making of Empire Strikes Back, again relatively affordable in smaller editions too, but you won't get one of these really for much under 30 quid, nor one of these for much under 40. And then the last one is the Making of Return of the Jedi by J.W. Rinsler. Now, the Making of Return of the Jedi and the Making of Star Wars are not adaptations or built upon Once Upon a Galaxy. They're separate entities, whereas obviously the Making of The Empire Strikes Back is built upon a complete rewrite from the ground up of Once Upon a Galaxy. And Once Upon a Galaxy kind of has the same kind of status as the Beatles' Let It Be film. It's been quietly left to just disappear out of circulation and be replaced by Peter Jackson's Get Back, which is a kind of like a re-edited version of Let It Be, which is due for release next year, but no one's ever seen it yet. There was a 5-minute sizzle reel. I hate that phrase, sizzle reel. Anyway, there's a 5-minute trailer promo for the new film Get Back, which was published onto YouTube today as a happy Christmas gift from the Beatles. But we'd rather have the money, guys, actually. So I'm kind of going to wrap up here, I think, around Empire Strikes Back. I've moved over swiftly past the holiday special, and let us never speak of that again. But let's also kind of think about where we left The Empire Strikes Back. So at the end of the movie, you know, we are left on a literal cliffhanger. Now, the balls of that, the second movie, is to then go, oh, by the way, I need to make a third movie to make this all happen. You know, if you've got a second sequel, most sequels don't failed at that point. You know, Jaws 2 is a classic example of a film that was almost a con trick that was designed to just make you go into the cinema to pay money to go and see a second Jaws movie. And what you've seen with franchises and with sequels is when people don't care about the sequels and all they really care about is selling enough tickets in order to make the film be profitable, you end up with franchises like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, the Jaws movies, things like that, where the quality kind of just jumps off a cliff and there's no care around what the film is going to be. Now, it would have been very, very easy to have made a second Star Wars movie and go, right, we need Darth Vader, we need him fighting Luke Skywalker, we need a victory, we need a big explosion, we need a big spaceship, we need to, you know, go through all of that stuff, we need to go back to Tatooine. But no, you know, as a sequel, The Empire Strikes Back takes all of the audience expectations around the beats that you would expect to see in a second film, and it throws them all away. It has its biggest battle at the beginning, in the first half hour, and not only that, the biggest battle is actually set in daylight, which is a nightmare to film. And the rebels get defeated because they have to run away and hide in things. You know, so as I said, the film is either about sneaking into places, such as Bespin, or running away from things, such as the Hoth defeat. So, you know, the big battle is over in the first half an hour, and the rebels get their asses kicked. So that completely flips your expectation about what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden you go, right, and then you spend most of the film, 3/4 of the film, has the heroes never have any screen time together. So we're looking at maybe 2 or 3 consecutive plot points that are happening. So we've got Luke on his own in Dagobah, we've got, or Dagobah, or however it's pronounced, you've got Han, Leia, Chewie, and C-3PO flying through space being chased by the big space bad guys, and then you've got an extra third plot that's introduced halfway through where the Emperor does a big exposition dump as Basil Exposition and tells Darth Vader, oh yeah, that Luke guy, he's your son, which is, you know, suddenly, but let's not talk about the special editions because they are hot garbage in that respect, and they make terrible narrative choices. So if you're going to watch the films, by the way, I would say go for the theatrical versions of the films. Now, since those don't exist on Blu-ray, what I'm going to suggest is something pretty radical. Is if you want to watch the 3 original Star Wars films, watch the first 3 hours on Blu-ray. Go for the 2011 Disney versions because it hasn't got Greedo going McClunky in it. And then just before the scene where the Emperor turns up, flip it over and go into the 2006 non-anamorphic DVDs. Because firstly, you don't get the Emperor spoon-feeding information through Darth Vader. And also in Return of the Jedi, there are some substantial changes in the 2011 and 1997 and 2004 versions of those movies that I think make those movies far, far worse. And I'm going to talk about that when I take Return of the Jedi round the corner and I give it a damn good kicking in a couple of episodes' time. So that's it. Empire Strikes Back, I think it's a great movie, but it is the middle act of a 3-act play. You've got your stasis, you've got your crisis, which is all through The Empire Strikes Back like a stick of rock, and you've got your resolution, which is going to be in Return of the Jedi. It's not quite a cliffhanger to the state of Best of Both Worlds. Obviously, the Star Trek episode, which is pretty much the best cliffhanger that's ever been done, or perhaps even the Italian Job. Which, by the way, the Italian Job has a cliffhanger that's never ever resolved. There was a proposal to make a second Italian Job movie where the Italian mafia actually turns up with a giant magnet in a helicopter, and they took the van and then they flew the van somewhere else, held up Michael Caine, stole all the gold, so Michael Caine and his gang were going to be chased by the Italian police and the Italian mafia whilst trying to get the gold back. They never made that sequel, which is both a good and a bad thing. Hang on a minute, lads. I've got a great idea. Let's not make a sequel to Italian Job. You've got to be really careful about sequels because very often they screw the pooch. And as you will see with some of the sequels, which I'm going to be talking about, especially around The Rise of Skywalker, is that those films are very unsatisfying meals to eat. But The Empire Strikes Back is actually still probably number one in my list of Star Wars movies. Not that anyone cares. That's not a controversial opinion, putting The Empire Strikes Back at number one. If I put The Rise of Skywalker at number one, yes, that would be controversial. The Empire Strikes Back is my favourite Star Wars movie. There is another movie we are going to talk about that comes really, really close to it, but that's for another episode. I've been talking at you for half an hour. I guarantee you it's past 10 o'clock now on the 21st of December, and therefore I have missed my window for the year to experience Rush's 2112 in its natural environment. I will wrap up here. My next episode is probably going to be me talking about U2's Joshua Tree whenever I can be bothered to do it. We're about to enter into the Christmas holidays, so I might either become totally bored and crazy and banging around the house and doing them every day, or I might not do any for weeks. I have no idea. And isn't that part of the joy? Is you don't know what's coming up, and partly that's because I don't know what's coming up either. Other things I will kind of say, yes, I'm going to finish all the U2 albums, I'm going to finish all the Star Wars movies, I'm going to go through all the Suede albums, I'm going to touch upon and talk about each one of the Pet Shop Boys albums and the associated singles and bits and bobs that go with it. But at this point, I'm going to wrap up with a few conclusions. Firstly, if you have the time, listen to the radio dramas of Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and try to forget that John Lithgow is Yoda. If you have the films, when you're watching them, watch the Blu-rays for the first hour, for the first part of Star Wars and the first hour of Empire Strikes Back, and turn off about 58 minutes into The Empire Strikes Back and switch over to your original theatrical DVDs because I'm a snob. And thirdly, I will talk about Return of the Jedi and how it is both a great sequel and somewhat terrible at the same time in another future episode. And with that, I'm going to wrap up and just remind you, like, subscribe, comment politely, ask questions if you like. If you find that these aren't interesting, just don't watch them. That's totally fine. I will see you again at some other point. Thank you, and adios, amigos.